The year is 1983, a single false alarm, and the world was seconds from nuclear annihilation. This isn't fiction, this isn't taught in school. But tonight, you'll hear what really happened, only on Whisper from History.
The year is 1945. Nazi Germany has fallen. The world breathes again, but only for a moment. In the rubble of Berlin, two flags rise, one American, one Soviet. Both were allies just months ago, standing shoulder to shoulder against Hitler. But now, distrust thickens the air. The handshake between generals is cold. Behind the smiles, calculations begin. The United States possesses the most powerful weapon the world has ever seen. Hiroshima and Nagasaki have already felt its wrath. Stalin watches from Moscow, deeply aware that his Red Army, though vast, has no answer to nuclear fire. He knows the balance of power is already broken. In secret Soviet bunkers, scientists are rushed into dark laboratories. Project First Lightning, Stalin's desperate race to match America's atom, is born. Meanwhile, Washington starts shaping its doctrine of containment, a strategy not of war, but of pressure. Quiet, crushing, constant pressure. Winston Churchill delivers a speech in Fulton, Missouri, drawing an invisible line across Europe. He calls it the Iron Curtain. To the west, democracy. To the east, the tightening grip of communism. In that moment, the Cold War is no longer theory, it's reality. Across the globe, nations are forced to choose sides. The world is split not by borders, but by ideology. Democracy versus dictatorship. Freedom versus control. Or so each side believes. In American homes, televisions flicker with propaganda films. Children crawl under desks in nuclear drills. The phrase duck and cover becomes a ritual of fear. In Soviet schools, students learn that capitalism is poison and the West wants their destruction. Both sides fund spies. Both sides build bombs. Both sides plan for a war no one dares to start. And yet, the first bullet has not been fired. The battlefield is everywhere and nowhere. This is no ordinary war, this is the Cold War.
Berlin, a city reduced to ruins, but still, the most dangerous chessboard in the world. After World War II, Germany is split in four: American, British, French, and Soviet zones. Berlin, deep inside Soviet territory, is also divided. But what begins as a temporary arrangement becomes a symbol of something far greater: freedom versus control. In 1948, tensions explode. The Soviets seal off West Berlin, choking roads, railways, and supply lines. Their goal: force the Allies to abandon it, starve the people, break their spirit. But America doesn't back down. Instead, they fly. The Berlin airlift begins. Day and night, planes roar overhead. Food, medicine, coal, over 2 million tons dropped from the sky. More than 200,000 flights in under a year. A victory not with bombs, but with resolve. Children wave as aircraft descend. They call them raisin bombers, dropping candy with parachutes. For a generation raised in rubble, these sweets feel like hope. In May 1949, the Soviets blink. The blockade ends, but the divide deepens. Soon after, two Germanys are born. West Germany FRG, backed by the US and allies. East Germany GDR, controlled by the Soviets. In East Berlin, life grows grim. Surveillance tightens. Freedom withers. As the Iron Curtain stretches, Berlin becomes a frontline city, one half lit by neon, the other dimmed by fear. Families are split. Friends vanish overnight. Tension coils like wire through the streets. For now, the border is just a line. But soon, it will be a wall of concrete and blood. This is Berlin, a city divided not just by politics, but by survival.
The war is over, but a new kind of arms race has begun. One not of tanks or soldiers, but of silence and fire. August 1945 proved the unimaginable. Two cities vanished in seconds. The atomic bomb wasn't just a weapon, it was a message, and the world listened. In the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin issues an order. The USSR must match America's nuclear power at any cost. Soviet scientists work in isolated bunkers under constant surveillance. Mistakes mean exile or worse. In 1949, they succeed. The Soviet Union detonates its first atomic bomb. America no longer holds a monopoly on destruction. The age of balance through terror begins. But balance is fragile. The 1950s bring a new monster, the hydrogen bomb, far more powerful than Hiroshima. Both superpowers build them by the dozens, then hundreds. Every test, every explosion is a threat without words. In hidden deserts and frozen plains, mushroom clouds rise into the sky. Civilians watch footage in awe. Some cheer, others stare, knowing that humanity now owns the means to end itself. Children in classrooms crawl under desks during drills. Fallout shelters are built beneath suburban homes. Fear becomes a routine part of life. But while politicians speak of defense, generals think in numbers. War plans are drafted. Entire cities are marked for erasure. Washington, Moscow, London, Beijing, targets in a war no one can survive. The doctrine is simple: mutually assured destruction. If one side fires, both will perish. Victory is impossible. Only deterrence remains. Behind closed doors, leaders calculate how many millions they're willing to lose. In boardrooms and bunkers, they gamble with the future of the world. And all it would take is one mistake. Berlin was only the beginning. All across the world, the Cold War starts to burn, quietly, indirectly. The superpowers avoid direct confrontation, but they fight through others, through nations caught in the middle. These are proxy wars. Korea, the North, backed by the Soviets and China, invades the South. The United States responds within days. What begins as a civil conflict becomes a global standoff. Nearly 5 million lives are lost. And after 3 years of brutal fighting, the borders barely move. But the message is clear: neither side will back down. Next comes Vietnam. The French failed to hold their colony, and America steps in. The logic is simple: if one country falls to communism, others will follow. It's called the domino theory. But Vietnam doesn't play by Cold War rules. Guerrilla fighters blend into the jungle. The US pours in troops, bombs, napalm, yet the enemy remains invisible. Back home, Americans watch the war unfold on their television screens. Bodies, burned villages, soldiers lost in a war with no end. Protests erupt, the nation fractures. By the time America leaves Vietnam, over 58,000 of its own are dead, and the country it tried to save falls anyway. In Latin America, Africa, the Middle East, CIA agents and KGB operatives manipulate elections, stage coups, arm rebels, train dictators, all in the name of stopping the other side. For the people caught in between, ideology means little. But the bombs, the famine, the disappearances, they are real. The Cold War is global. Its battlefield has no borders. Its victims have no voice. And the fire continues to spread, quiet, relentless.
Cuba, just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. But in 1959, it might as well be another world. Fidel Castro rises to power, overthrowing a US-backed dictator. At first, Washington watches carefully. But when Castro aligns with the Soviet Union, alarms go off in every corner of the Pentagon. Then, in 1961, the US tries to remove him. A covert CIA mission known as the Bay of Pigs involves Cuban exiles trained to invade. It fails miserably, embarrassingly. Castro survives, stronger than before. Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev sees an opportunity. He strikes a secret deal with Castro. Nuclear missiles will be installed in Cuba, right under America's nose. In October 1962, American spy planes photograph the missile sites. The images go straight to President John F. Kennedy. The world stops. For 13 days, humanity holds its breath. US warships surround Cuba. Soviet ships sail toward the blockade. One wrong move, and it's nuclear war. Inside the White House, military generals push for airstrikes. In Moscow, the KGB prepares for the worst. On both sides, men with launch codes wait for orders. But instead of war, something else happens. Factional negotiations lead to a quiet deal. The Soviets withdraw the missiles from Cuba. In return, the US secretly agrees to remove its missiles from Turkey. The crisis ends, but it leaves a scar. The world saw how close it came to annihilation. Not through invasion, not through ideology, but through fear, pride, and miscalculation. After Cuba, a hotline is installed, direct contact between Washington and Moscow. A red telephone, a symbol of how fragile peace truly is. Because next time, there may not be 13 days.
The Cold War isn't just fought with guns or bombs, it's fought with minds. Both superpowers turn to science, to space, to the skies above Earth, because the real high ground is orbit. In 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite, a metal sphere no bigger than a beach ball, but its impact is seismic. It beeps as it circles the globe, proof that the USSR can reach the heavens and maybe launch weapons from space. Americans panic. If the Soviets own the skies, what's next? The space race begins. Just months later, the US creates NASA. Billions are poured into science, math, engineering. Schools rewrite curriculums. Children are told, the future is above you. But the Soviets keep winning. In 1961, Yuri Gagarin becomes the first human in space, one orbit around the Earth, and the balance shifts again. Then in 1962, John F. Kennedy makes a promise. America will land a man on the moon before the decade ends. It's bold, some say impossible, but the goal is set, and failure is not an option. Throughout the 60s, rockets explode, prototypes fail, astronauts die. But progress continues. Computers become smaller, more powerful. Engineers invent, adapt, push past the limits of known science. Then 1969, Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins. 4 days of radio silence and drifting space. Then, one step. A single boot on lunar soil, broadcast live, 600 million people watching. We came in peace for all mankind. In that moment, America wins the space race. But something else happens too. From space, there are no borders, no ideologies, just a fragile blue planet hanging in the dark. For a brief moment, the Cold War pauses, not in treaties, not in battle, but in awe.
The Cold War wasn't just fought overseas. It crept into American living rooms, classrooms, offices. It changed how people lived, trusted, and feared day by day. This was the Red Scare. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, fear of communist infiltration spreads like wildfire. Whispers turn into accusations. Neighbors suspect neighbors. Celebrities, teachers, even government officials are questioned. Are you now, or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? One man leads the charge, Senator Joseph McCarthy. Armed with lists, rumors, and fear, he turns hearings into witch hunts. Careers are destroyed, lives ruined. People are jailed, blacklisted, silenced. In Hollywood, writers and actors vanish from credits. In schools, books are banned. Across the nation, loyalty oaths are signed not out of patriotism, but panic. Behind the scenes, the FBI keeps secret files on thousands of Americans. Surveillance becomes the norm. Privacy, a luxury. But fear isn't one. The Soviet Union has its own paranoia. Informants are everywhere. Dissent is crushed. The KGB tracks every move, every word, every look. A wrong joke can land someone in prison or worse. Both nations feed off each other's fear. Propaganda films show mushroom clouds leveling cities. Children practice duck and cover drills under school desks as if that could stop a nuclear blast. Bunkers are built, gas masks sold. People stockpile food and water, because the next war might come without warning, and might end everything. In this atmosphere, trust dies quietly, and though no bombs fall, the Cold War burns deep inside, where fear lives.
They called it détente. By the early 1970s, both superpowers realized the cost of endless tension, proxy wars, nuclear stockpiles, espionage. The risk of total destruction never leaves the room. And so, for the first time, they try something different: talking. US President Richard Nixon visits Moscow in 1972. The handshake is cold, calculated, but historic. It leads to SALT Y, the Strategic Arms Limitation talks. Both sides agree to freeze their number of nuclear missiles. It's not peace, but it's pause. Meanwhile, something else is shifting. Inside the Soviet Union, the economy groans under the weight of its military machine. Resources are stretched thin, technology lags, citizens wait in long lines for bread, while billions are spent on tanks and rockets. In America, the Watergate scandal topples Nixon. The nation looks inward. Vietnam has ended, badly. Trust in government fades. Yet even in these shadows, both nations keep watching each other. Spies trade secrets in parking garages. Satellites hover silently in orbit. Diplomats smile for cameras while drawing red lines behind closed doors. Then in 1979, détente dies. The Soviet Union invades Afghanistan. The US responds with outrage, boycotting the 1980 Olympics, arming Afghan rebels and reigniting Cold War flames. A new president enters the White House, Ronald Reagan. He calls the USSR an evil empire. Military budgets surge. Nuclear weapons return to center stage. Missiles are placed in Europe. War games mimic real attacks. Soviet leadership fears an American first strike. Paranoia rises on both sides. And once again, the world moves closer to the brink. Because even when both sides try to step back, history shows they always return to the edge.
Gorbachev's rise changes everything. He isn't like the hardliners before him. He talks of transparency, accountability, and modernization. He travels to the West, smiles in press conferences, gives interviews in soft tones, and behind the scenes he knows the Soviet Union is bleeding out. Glasnost means openness, fewer secrets, more press freedom, truth about the past. For the first time, Soviet citizens hear about Stalin's purges, the gulags, the real cost of Chernobyl. Perestroika means restructuring, economic reforms, market-like changes in a system built on central control. But change is dangerous, especially when it's partial. Factories struggle, prices rise, shortages worsen, old power structures resist. The public grows restless. Still, the world watches Gorbachev. The West sees hope. Reagan meets him. Agreements are signed. INF Treaty, 1987. The first time both sides agreed to eliminate a whole class of nuclear weapons. Missiles are dismantled, warheads are destroyed, but inside the Soviet bloc, pressure explodes. In Poland, a movement called Solidarity, led by workers and poets, gains strength. In East Germany, citizens whisper about freedom. In Hungary, barbed wire fences come down. The Iron Curtain begins to rust. And then comes 1989. In East Berlin, thousands gather, chanting, demanding, the guards don't fire. One gives an order he wasn't supposed to, let them through. Crowds flood the wall. They don't just cross it, they tear it down with hammers, fists, and joy. The Berlin Wall falls, the symbol of division gone in one night. Across Eastern Europe, communist regimes collapse like dominoes. No invasion, no bombs. Just people saying enough. Gorbachev watches. He doesn't send tanks. Because by now even he knows. The Soviet Empire is unraveling, and nothing can stop it.
It ends not with a bang, but with a resignation. By 1991, the Soviet Union is a shell. The economy has collapsed. Store shelves are empty. The people are exhausted. Republics begin declaring independence. Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, then more. One by one, they break away. Even inside Russia, protests erupt. The people chant for democracy, for freedom, for food. Gorbachev tries to hold the center, but it's already gone. Then in August, hardliners in the Communist Party stage a coup. Tanks roll into Moscow. Gorbachev is placed under house arrest. But something remarkable happens. The people resist. Thousands flood the streets. Civilians face down tanks. Boris Yeltsin, president of the Russian Republic, climbs on a tank and defies the coup. The military hesitates. Soldiers join the crowd. The coup fails in 3 days. But so does the USSR. Gorbachev returns to power, but he has no power left. On December 25, 1991, he sits at a desk on national television. The Soviet flag is behind him. He speaks calmly. "I hereby resign as president of the Soviet Union." That night, the red flag comes down over the Kremlin. In its place, the Russian tricolor. The Cold War is over. No nuclear war, no formal treaty, just silence. After nearly 50 years of tension, fear, proxy wars and espionage, it ends quietly. The world breathes, but not without scars. The United States stands alone as the global superpower. Russia enters a decade of chaos. Former Soviet republics face corruption, war, and uncertainty. But the shadow of the Cold War never disappears. Even today, its echoes remain, in borders, in mistrust, in diplomacy, in memory. Because you can end a war, but you can't erase the fear it taught the world to live with.